Make some noise.
Oddities. I have a weird, quirky tendency towards seeking out and collecting albums from bands and artists not a whole lot of people probably know or care about. This can range from obscure underground bands to unpopular and forgotten albums from more established artists. Sure, I have some of the well-known albums from bands, but it's the obscure and lesser-known stuff I find the most intriguing. I'm expecting someone to be watching this video and be like,
Harry, I recognize these bands.
No, you won't. Maybe. I don't know. Some more than others. So in this new series I'm starting, I'll showcase some unique oddities that I have in my collection. Hopefully you'll find something that you'll want to check out. Or if not, that's totally fine. We all have different tastes. Also, no, despite the title, I am not making the series region or state specific for each episode. I'm only doing that because all the oddities come from the same state and I thought it was funny. It would have to be a very rare thing for it to be thematic. Lastly, I will only be looking at CDs because that is what I collect. I am not a vinyl guy. Kind of like how that Mike Patton wannabe motherfucker never shuts up about California, I'm someone who sometimes doesn't shut up about New York. Despite being there once in my life. Shut up. The state that gave us bands like Typo Negative, Dio, Anthrax, Blue Oyster Cult, Dream Theater, Kiss, among the most well-known of crossover thrash and hardcore punk. What weird shit was I able to find in my collecting endeavors? Well, I did mention Typo Negative, so I might as well get the obvious stuff out of the way. Here are some Typo-affiliated bands. I'll go in chronological order. First, there's alternative metal band Pist.On, with their first album, 1996's Number 1, which was produced by Josh Silver, and is a personal favorite of mine, where I don't think there are any duds on this album. Miraculously, I have the original version and the 1997 Atlantic reissue, a story for another time. There's also their second album, 1999's Sellout, where I enjoy half this album and don't care about another half. You'll have to use your eyes to see which ones I like and don't like. It's not as good as the first album, but it still has some solid songs. The band would make an EP in 2001 and split up the same year, and reform in 2015, and recently this year in 2022 they released a new EP, and I think it's really good. Check this band out if you enjoy alternative metal that you'd hear on the radio in the 90s and 2000s. I might make a video on this band in depth in the future. Next is Seventh Void, which was formed in 2003 and features half of Typo Negative, that being Kenny Hickey and Johnny Kelly. You could say this band was a predecessor to Silvertomb, as it's largely the same lineup minus guitarist Matt Brown, with the addition of a keyboard player, Aaron Juice, and third guitarist, as he plays both instruments. From interviews I was able to dig up, the band was formed with the intent of doing something simpler musically than what Typo was doing at the time with their first album, 2009's Heaven Is Gone, which was released in the US on Vinnie Paul's Big Vin Records, which is what you're looking at, though the album was only released in America at the time. The album would get its European release in 2010 via Napalm Records, along with new visuals. At the time, Typo Negative was signed to Napalm Records after SPV shut down in the late 2000s, as someone from SPV went on to work with Napalm, bringing Typo Negative and Monster Magnet to the label, and the deal was extended over to Seventh Void. This was all in 2010. Had Peter still been alive, we would have seen the follow-up to Dead Again be released on Napalm. Oh, the things that could have been. The last Typo-affiliated band I'll talk about is A Pale Horse Named Death, formed by Sal Abrascato, Typo Negative's first drummer, at the start of the 2010s. The best way to summarize this band is they sound like a darker Alice in Chains mixed with Degradation Trip era Jerry Cantrell, if you know the tone and mood of that double album. My favorite album from them, which is the only one I've listened to so far, is their 2013 sophomore, Lay My Soul to Waste. Hopefully I'll get around to listening to the rest of their discography, as I'm overdue, along with many other bands' discographies, not just this one. All I could do is be honest about it. Now that we got the obvious stuff out of the way, let's get obscure. Throughout the 90s, there were a lot of trends and styles that got big. The focus of this oddity is groove metal. You know, that style that was started by Exhorder and popularized by Pantera, which spawned a bunch of good or bad bands for a few decades. Here's a band that I found that was buried in the sands of time. This is O.C.D. from New York City, and yes, that does stand for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. This was a thrash and groove metal band that was around from 1993 to some point at the turn of the millennia. Little can be found on the band in terms of information, but the key member being singer David Ames. There are two other members that are worth noting. The first one being bassist Laurie Safdie, who would later go on to play in black metal band Mutilation Rites and stoner thrash band Orb of Confusion, but both bands have been split up since 2011. From my research, she still plays, but I couldn't find what band she plays in nowadays. The other noteworthy band member is Jonathan Mover, who's performed with a ton of musicians. Two large ones that easily come to mind are Alice Cooper and Joe Satriani. This band would release 3 studio albums. The first 2 I have no idea how they are because they are nowhere to be found online. Their third and final album, on the other hand, is available to listen to, and that's the one I own. Ritualistic was released at some point in 1999 on Organ Grinder Records, which released their previous album Hoard, Wash, Pray, Repeat, and released not a whole hell of a lot. The only releases this label had were death metal bands Ankel Glockner's only album, Mortus Duus, and The Second Coming, which was a tribute album to 80s rock and metal, O.C.D. being on this compilation. I can't make heads or tails whether or not this label is still active or not, even after finding their website on the Wayback Machine. If anyone knows what happened to Organ Grinder Records, please leave a comment. Musically, it sounds like something you'd expect from a 90s groove metal band, with groovy guitars and pounding drums and vocals that sound like Phil Anselmo, but the vocals are more melodic compared to Cowboys from Hell or even his work on Down. Not only does the band's guitarist JJB take notes from Dimebag Darrell, but Laurie takes notes from Rex Brown, as the bass has a very audible presence with the guitars. It also helps that the mix engineer was able to balance out everything. The mixing was done by Michael Wagner, who was responsible for mixing albums for several metal bands. A few famous examples include So Far So Good So What by Megadeth, No More Tears by Ozzy Osbourne, and Inside the Electric Circus by Wasp. It seems like these underground bands are able to hire talent to help with their album production. Keep that in mind for later. Lyrically, there's a lot of pain and suffering going on. It's like David was having a mental health crisis at the time. I don't get a feeling of cheesiness when investigating the lyrics. Honestly, the only complaints I have is that Ames' vocals are a tad hit or miss with his delivery, and that there are times where you feel the length of these songs as rhythm sections tend to go on for a little too long, making the songs drag a little bit. Don't get me wrong, I love me some long songs, but you can feel the length when listening to the longer cuts on this album. Also, there are 2 hidden tracks that aren't listed on the back of the CD. A nonsensical track where David expresses his unhealthy hatred for John Wayne. I mean, come on, man. The dude's been dead for 20 years at that point. That's just not nice. I guess this is The other hidden track is a cover of Alice Cooper's I Love the Dead. It's pretty much on par, but sped up a bit, and metalized, and Dave does a good job of mimicking Alice's vocal inflection. A groove metal curiosity, to say the least. Check this album out if you're interested. Nowadays, it's hard to find anything on this band, as is the case with a lot of underground bands from the 90s. You can still find their website in its ungodly late 90s, early 2000s glory with content, or lack thereof, that makes me both annoyed and weirded out. I'll let you use your eyes to figure out why. There is a YouTube channel that's ran by David Ames himself that has music videos, demos, and concert footage from the O.C.D. days, as well as his other band Lode, whose sound is a mix of groove and funk metal plus turntables. It's pretty interesting. He doesn't seem to post a lot anymore, with his last upload being in 2020, and I think it's safe to assume he's retired from music as nothing new has been posted music-wise. But hopefully he's doing well and living his best life nowadays, long after his music career.
We have our obsessive compulsive disorder.
This next oddity comes from upstate New York, specifically Clifton Park. This is Section 8. Formed in 1994, it consists of a group of friends who knew each other before they were bandmates. Sound familiar? And would release Pain is Truth in 1995 and their second and last album, 9 Ways to Say I Love You, in 97. I can guess what you're thinking. What is this? Pop rock or glam or something? Nope, it's something else. Let me play a snippet. Despite the title of the album, Section 8 is considered a hardcore band with elements of doom and sludge. For historical context, this band was active during a hardcore scene that was happening in the Troy area in the 90s. The best way I can summarize how they sound is that they sound like Life of Agony meets Acid Bath. Singer Jan Casey Dorr has a similar timbre similar to early career Mina Caputo, with the baritone style singing, meets the abrasive screams of Dax Riggs. The bass tone is reminiscent of Audie Petre's bass tone, with the high-end clang, if you're familiar with his sound. What's funny is that Section 8 actually opened up for Acid Bath in 1997. Like with O.C.D's Ritualistic, 9 Ways to Say I Love You also has a lot of heartbreak, trials, and tribulation going on in the lyrics. Nothing romantic going on in this album. Remember when I mentioned underground bands hiring great talent for their album production? Here's another example. 9 Ways' mastering was done by Howie Weinberg, known for mastering some of music's most celebrated albums from Slayer to Nirvana to so many others that I encourage you to look up what albums he's mastered. Section 8 would stop approximately a decade after their formation. From my research, only Casey would go on to form another band, Gunther Weasel, a sludge stoner band he's been with since its inception in 2004. They would still be in talks with one another, and in 2013 they would get back together for a few reunion shows, but after that I couldn't tell you, as finding information on their current whereabouts is difficult to find as their Facebook page is not all that active. What's interesting to notice is that finding a copy for this album is near impossible to get unless you want to waste almost $100 on Discogs, and no, that's not how I got this copy you're looking at on screen. I was directed by a friend that the band has a Merch Now page where you can buy licensed merchandise by the band, including a copy of 9 Ways. Check out this band if they interest you. The last oddity I'm going to show you was a side project that wasn't the main focus of its founding member. But like so many other one-off side projects that have one album to its name, it's quite a gem. That and it doesn't really exist all that much online until recently. This is Dead Rabbits, not to be confused with the metalcore supergroup from Phoenix, Arizona that goes by The Dead Rabbits, with 2 T's, but the sludge metal band from Troy, New York, called Dead Rabbits, with a singular T. This band was started by Mike Maney, who is also the lead guitarist and co-founder of hardcore band Stigmata, a prominent band from the 90s Troy hardcore scene. In the beginning, Dead Rabbits was a one-man side project where Maney performed all instruments, but around 2002 a lineup was formed, turning Dead Rabbits into a fully fledged band. For the finalized lineup, Mike performs lead guitar and vocals, Jason Sunks on rhythm guitar, and fun fact, was a member of Stigmata for a time, and Brendan Slater and Daniel Dinsmore on bass and drums respectively, who were members of industrial metal band The Clay People and later stoner metal band Ironweed. The band would release their one and only album Sin Eater in November of 2005 by Athela Productions, which doesn't exist anymore, and be re-released in 2006 by Over It Records. Over It Records, which doesn't exist anymore either, was some sort of record label subdivision of a company called Over It Media, which specialized in graphic design, web development, marketing, among other things. And you want to know what's funny about this? The guy who founded Over It Media was Daniel Dinsmore, the same guy who drummed for Dead Rabbits and Clay People. Now that's funny. It shows you that other people have other hobbies outside of their normal business. Just look at Richard Christie. The album was produced and mixed by Mike himself, with Jason co-producing, and mastering being done by someone named Daniel Reese. So how does this album sound? All over the place, and I'm not complaining. Production-wise, it sounds raw with the guitar tones, but nothing is overwhelming on the mixes of these songs. Feels perfectly balanced. At times it sounds bluesy, sometimes doomy, sometimes southern, stoner, and sludgy. Sometimes having a little bit of hardcore in the instrumentation on some of the songs, and given Maney's background. Mike is credited as the primary songwriter for most of the songs, with Jason Suggs being credited for 2 songs. From what I've read, reviewers have compared Dead Rabbits to bands like Black Label Society and Corrosion of Conformity, and I can see why, as Dead Rabbits does have that southern rock vibe to them, with a hint of Sabbath. Plus, Maney's singing and guitar playing sounds like a mix of Zakk Wylde meets Pepper Keenan and Woody Weatherman, as well as Iommi and Ozzy, and that should be taken as a compliment given Mike Maney's talent on the guitar, as well as his singing ability. The sludge factor is more compared to Down and Corrosion of Conformity instead of something like I Hate God, if that makes any sense, as Dead Rabbits is not abrasive. The most intense moments on this album come from Neurotic Fanatic and No One Else to Blame, as one song features distorted vocals and the other one features distortion and screamed vocals respectively. Some songs are more rocky and chugging, others more faster and intense, but not too intense. Also, the atmospheric clean section at the end of the Sabbath-inspired Sleep is a highlight. Mike definitely knew how to switch it up with each song. The album contains a cover of Jimi Hendrix's Manic Depression, which sounds faithful to the original like how King's X's cover is faithful, as opposed to Carnivore's version, which is a whole different beast. The 2006 reissue contained additional tracks consisting of covers after a track of silence called Just Dead Rabbit Space plays. These additional covers are Creedance Clearwater Revival's Fortunate Son, Paegan Love Song by Acid Bath, interesting choice, and another Hendrix cover, Little Wing. Fortunate Son gets a country rock reimagining, and Little Whip and Paegan Love Song are more faithful to the original versions. I'm honestly just surprised that someone would cover Acid Bath of all bands along with 2 pieces of classic rock. It's just weird but beautiful at the same time, especially being an Acid Bath fan myself. But I will say this, and I think we can all agree, that as good as Mike's performance is vocally, he can't beat Dax Riggs. I also found something else. The 2006 Digipack has a typo in it, and they spelled Dax's last name wrong. Whoops! This doesn't take away from the quality of the album, it's just something that I found to be really funny. Check this album out if you enjoy some southern fried sludge metal. Mike would continue to perform and record with Stigmata until the band's hiatus in 2016. From my research, he doesn't seem to be working on new music nowadays, but continues to run his Gold Tiger tattoo shop in Saratoga Springs. And that'll be everything. For now. Did you recognize any of these oddities, or was this the first time you've heard of these bands? It'll be interesting reading the comments to see the reactions to these bands I mentioned in this video. As stated, the next episode won't be themed around a specific place. It'll be more randomly selected unless a discovery is made around the oddities where a theme is noticed. I'll figure out when I make the next episode.